Well, today's event was really about having a good debate around how you encourage whistleblowing, should you be encouraging whistleblowing, and what are the implications once someone has blown the whistle, what steps you as an organisation can take both to protect yourselves but also to protect the person who has blown the whistle.
So it does tend to have that negative attachment, and along goes with sort of snitching on people, telling tales, all of those things which we're all brought up to feel is a bad thing. So the term that we prefer to use is speak up, because actually what companies actually want, or any organisation, is wanting people to actually speak up and raise issues before things go wrong. So there's an opportunity for the organisation to put things right, and that's really what we're talking about in terms of speak up programmes. There is a problem though. We talk about speak up and everybody gets it and they understand it and see it's positive, but when something does go wrong, what do you call the person? And we go back to that term whistleblower. So everybody put their thinking caps on. You can't call them a speak upper, really, speaker up, or an alerter, or whatever. So we need to continue to find new language for this. There are many ways that companies have to raise issues, and they're usually set out in their codes of ethics. The first line is always speak to your line manager. However, of course, sometimes that person might actually be part of the problem. You can't actually feel that you can speak to them. So there are many other channels that are open for people to raise issues. Emails, intranet sites, post boxes, ombudsman, many other ways. And then the final way, really, although some may use it as first, is actually some form of call line, which you can access remotely or desktop.
From the Institute's perspective, I think tonight was really interesting, and I hope that a lot of people have taken away some practical points, especially from what Susan was saying in terms of what it's like in the field, and particularly in a university environment, because we don't often hear or speak to people who are working in that environment.
The focus has very much become on the principles, and it's all about the way we're going to behave with each other at the school. So one of the big principles is equality of esteem and opportunity. And then another one is about sustainability, which of course everybody loves at the LSE, deeply embedded. But if you view a code through that very different optic, it's really for us rather change the emphasis. And I've had a great many discussions with people where it's more about actually how do we prevent something happening? How do we behave with each other so things in that sense don't go wrong, so someone feels they need to blow a whistle? And that's where just finding someone that you can talk to often in a confidential space has been as important as the formal mechanisms in place. I'd be very interested to hear and discuss whether that's a shared experience. In my 4, 5, 6 years of operating, often as a sort of the ambassador for ethics in quite different organisations, I mean, what has struck me is, in practical terms, how very difficult it is to do anything with an anonymously blown whistle. Not least, how do you contact someone to say you've actually done something? And I would be very interested to share and hear experience, and indeed what the advice, the best practice is here.
It was absolutely fascinating listening to Philippa and Susan's experiences, because I think they have a lot more on-the-ground experience of being on the receiving end of people blowing the whistle, and about how they've actually dealt with those in practice, and kind of hearing it sort of from the front line, as it were, was very interesting. And I think Susan made some really valuable points about the issues that she's seen in her role, and people's sensitivities around blowing the whistle, and the concerns they have about will people actually do anything about it, and how we can encourage that.
And in a way celebrate it, quite how everyone does that, I think, needs to be very carefully judged. But this can be a very positive opportunity.
Also, I think the legal point is always useful to catch up on, and it will be interesting to see if we do end up with fees and incentives. But I hope that the message was getting across that one needs to use as many different ways and different opportunities to get people to speak up as possible.
The official whistleblowing charity did a survey back in November of 2013, and similar to the statistics that Philippa has already mentioned to you, they interviewed people who had actually had blown the whistle, who had spoke up, and come back to the same terminology again, doesn't it? What we're going to call these people. I call them all sorts of things, terms that I don't think I'll share with you today. But 60% of people who had raised concerns said they didn't actually receive any response from management. Now, I think that really is a problem for you, because it doesn't mean that nothing happened, but it means that that message wasn't being fed back to the people. And that creates a real problem for you in terms of employee engagement and in terms of the employee understanding you've actually actioned it. And if further down the line you find yourself in court because something happens to that person, the first thing they're going to say is, well, actually, I put my hand up about that and nobody did anything. And that doesn't look good for you from a business perspective, it doesn't look good for you from a PR perspective or a reputational brand either. So I think some people probably come on to talk about, no doubt, is about how you actually report back to the individual who has blown the whistle and how you actually manage their expectations. The other interesting statistic was that 7 out of 10 people who had blown the whistle said their position was worsened as a result of doing so. Now again, query, they are going to say that. They're not going to say, oh yes, I was dismissed because I was an underperformer. They're going to say, I was dismissed because I raised this issue about bullying. But it is interesting that people suddenly perceive a detriment as a result of being a whistleblower. The legal regime doesn't really help you encourage people to blow the whistle. Rather, it's there to protect people who do it. So as I mentioned about not suffering a detriment, the law actually provides that anybody, whether not just an employee but a worker, so taking a much more generic term, is protected from suffering a detriment if they blow the whistle. So that detriment may be they miss out on a promotion opportunity, they miss out on a bonus they were expecting, and if you're an employee, you're protected from dismissal as a result of blowing the whistle. And the reason why that comes up so much is it's what we call a day one right. So from the day your employment starts, you are protected in terms of your legal whistleblowing rights. So it's not one of these rights where you have to be in employment for a year or 2 years before you can bring your claim. The other reason it's really important is any compensation you can be paid as a result of being dismissed or suffering a detriment is unlimited. So you may have heard that there's a cap on certain compensation for dismissal. Well, that cap comes off. So you can imagine employee lawyers quite often like to throw whistleblowing in on their claims because it puts real pressure on the company in terms of that compensation risk as to what can be paid. I think one of the key learning points that will hopefully come out of the debate is really that it's not a bad thing to encourage whistleblowing. I think particularly as a lawyer we're so used to dealing with what goes wrong when somebody's blowing the whistle and kind of portraying the doom and gloom scenario, whereas actually it's about saying to companies, to organisations, encourage it. There is good to become from people speaking up and saying what you could do differently, and about acting on that and showing that you've acted on that to give that positive message to employees that this is the right thing to do.